is now in session. We'll call that to order, and if the clerk will call the roll, please.
Dwayne Jones,
Here.
Glenn Zering,
Here.
Dennis Johnson, Marlene McBride, Catherine Levy.
Here.
Thank you, Nancy. First on the item of the approval of the agenda, we do have a couple of changes to it. We will be adding in the organizational election, which is dictated as something we take care of a meeting by the ZBA in January of each year. And with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Story to conduct the beginning of the nominations.
All right, thank you. So according to the bylaws of the City of Manistee, the Zoning Board of Appeals will hold their election as said at this meeting. So I'd like to open the nominations for the Chair of the Zoning Board of Appeals for the year 2020.
I'd like to nominate Glenn Zering.
Second.
Okay, there's been one nomination for Glenn Zering for Zoning Board of Appeals Chair. Are there any other nominations? Are there any other nominations for Zoning Board of Appeals Chairman for 2020? Hearing none, it's time for a roll call vote. Nancy?
Dwayne Jones,
Yes.
Catherine Levy,
Yes.
and Glenn Zering.
Yes, thank you.
I'll turn the meeting over to you, Chair.
Okay, Kyle, thank you very much, and thank you, folks. We'll do what we can here as the chair for this year. And now I'd like to open nominations for the vice chair for the Zoning Board of Appeals. Do I hear a nomination? Hearing none, I would like to nominate Dwayne for vice chair. Are there any other nominations? Are there any other nominations? Hearing none, the nominee is Dwayne. Nancy, if you would call the roll, please.
Dwayne,
Yes.
Glenn,
Yes.
Catherine,
Yes.
Thank you, and thank you, Dwayne. Now for the recording secretary, we need a nomination.
I'd like to nominate Catherine.
I would second that. Don't worry. Are there any other nominations? Are there any other nominations? Hearing none, Catherine is nominated for the recording secretary. Nancy, if you'd take the roll, please.
Dwayne Jones,
Yes.
Glenn Zering,
Yes.
Catherine.
Reluctantly.
Yeah, you just let him. You don't object, huh?
All right. Seeing that, Catherine, you are the recording secretary. Thank you very much. At this point, too, I would like to have Nancy call up the bylaws. We do need to have an approval of those. Nancy?
She's got to do secretary.
Appoint the recording secretary.
So she was,
Okay.
She is the recording, or she is the secretary.
Aha. So we need to appoint the recording secretary? And that,
yep. So she was nominated for secretary. I think that's what you meant to say. So,
okay, I stand corrected.
yep. So she's the secretary, and then you nominate the recording secretary to keep the minutes for the ZBA, which would be Nancy. So if
Yeah,
you,
she can just appoint too.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, since we're doing, let's nominate Nancy for recording secretary. Do I hear a second?
Second?
Second.
Everybody second.
Yeah, we all.
That was awful quick.
And would you call the rolls?
Dwayne Jones,
Yes.
Glenn Zering,
Yes.
Catherine Levy.
Yes.
All right. Thank you very much.
Can I just make one little, it's Levy.
Okay. Catherine Levy, got it.
Levy.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you for the correction there. And at this point, Nancy, I believe we can go ahead and take a look at the bylaws. And this is, again, a formality. If we have any changes recommended for this, I believe that's the way we need to go with it, Nancy. Is that correct?
Yeah, you can just approve them as they are, and then they, with the comment of they can be amended anytime during the year.
So moved.
I would move that we approve them as they stand.
Second?
Call the roll on that, please.
Dwayne Jones,
Yes.
Glenn Zaring,
Yes.
Catherine Levy.
Yes.
I got it.
All right.
So many people do it.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, we had the approval of the minutes of the December 19th, 2019 meeting. Kyle, that was done via email, as I recall. Do we need to take any action on that?
No, it's already been acted
That's
upon.
just a note? All right, good. Thank you very much. Next up here is a public hearing. If we have any comments from our public at this point,
I suspect I know why they're here.
I have an idea. All right, hearing none, we'll go ahead and move into our business session. Action on pending cases. First of all, the one at 220 Arthur Street.
All right, so more information has been provided by the applicant for 220 Arthur Street. Last meeting, there was discrepancy, if you will, regarding the type of sign and location. More information, like I said, has been provided, which is in front of you now. The different information that is now presented is the setback as well as the type of sign being a monument sign. So the applicant is in attendance to answer any questions you may have.
Members of the board, do we have any additional questions?
I don't. I looked this over, went by there a couple more times. Of course, I go to Manistee Medical Care every day, so I get to go by there a lot, and I really don't have any issues with it.
Okay. Ms. Levy?
Oh, no, I'm good. I'm good with this too.
Okay. I've reviewed it also, and with clarification, we'll be doing monument signs as opposed to a pole sign.
Right.
That's correct?
Yeah. So the second, the image in front of you, the graphic, is the monument sign with the larger base, 4 foot wide by 2 foot tall, as well as the setback shown in the different images above. So being that this is a variance request, we'll need to go down the different basic conditions as well as special conditions too before moving forward and voting. So if there's any more questions or if the applicant would like to say anything about the phasing or anything about the project, now's a good time for that.
All right.
My question would be putting up a sign for a driveway that doesn't yet exist. I think that it should be contingent upon the completion of that driveway before that sign.
We're talking about the egress route for the trucks to come in? Correct.
This is the existing driveway. It's the existing driveway, the furthest south.
Okay.
But there was one that you were talking about doing where there was an old house and
Yeah, the other,
Feel free to, if you'd like to stand up to the podium if you'd like, either.
Nancy,
we don't have screens up.
you have a
I can't-
screen for Nan?
Oh, you've got to just turn the power on, lower
Oh.
him.
Oh, I don't know.
I got it.
There you go.
Yeah.
the original request at the last meeting was for 3 directional signs and to move the main ID sign. Because of some of the questions that came up with the marijuana district, we revised the application for just 1 directional sign, and we'll take on the other 2 when that property gets developed. So this is for the first driveway.
Okay.
There has been a directional sign there in the past, and it's taken out quite often.
Yeah.
So,
Okay,
So we're just doing the one sign at this point in time.
That's correct.
answers my question.
That helps. Members of the board, do we have any questions for Tom or
Good
Bob?
to go.
Kathleen?
No more?
Okay. Okay, Kyle, I think we're probably ready to proceed. Now, does this, since we've been through some of this already, do we just have an up or down vote at this point? or
Yep,
we
so a yes vote would be that you would allow for a variance to be granted for the 1 directional sign to be added with conditions of the other 2 coming into fruition while the completions of the projects happen, is what I was understanding what you just said. So I'll read all the different basic conditions, the justifications given, and then a yes vote would mean that you agree that a variance should be granted, and a no vote would mean that you would not be. So, since there are 3 individuals on the board sitting today, 2 would constitute, if 2 voted for the same answer, it would constitute that answer superseding. Does that make sense?
Correct.
Okay. So, the board shall have the power to authorize upon an appeal specific variances from such requirements as lot area width regulations, building height regulations, yard and depth regulations, parking and loading requirements, and other things that finds necessary based on all of the basic conditions, and any one of the specific conditions set forth herein can be satisfied. So what was been submitted along with the established fees was a narrative demonstrating why this variance is sought, which I'll go over now at the basic conditions number 1. The requested variance is not contrary to the public interest or to the intent and purpose of this ordinance. The justification reads, "These signs will identify driveways and allow for safe turning decisions by motorists. Motorists that stay in Manistee spend money locally, thus improving property values."
At this point, do we just go ahead and call a vote or ask for any questions?
You can either discuss it, ask questions about it, or get right into the vote. It's up to you.
Do we have any questions? Not here. All right. If we can, we'll go ahead and take a vote on this first one. Nancy, if you would call the roll?
Dwayne Jones,
Yes.
Glenn Zaring,
Yes.
Catherine Levy,
Yes.
Basic condition number 1 has been found to be met. Basic condition number 2 states the requested variance does not establish a use that is not permitted by right or by a special use permit in the zoning district. The justification states, in fact, traffic control signs were exempt from permits until 2017 when the ordinance was modified for content discrimination.
Do we have any questions? All right, if you would call the roll, please, Nancy?
Dwayne Jones,
Yes.
Glenn Zaring,
Yes.
Catherine Levy,
Yes.
Basic condition number 2 has been met. Basic condition number 3 states the requested variance does not create an adverse effect upon properties in the immediate vicinity or in the district itself. The justification states, these signs will promote safe turning decisions, freeing other motorists to make safe turning decisions into neighboring properties.
Do we have any questions?
Nope.
Nancy, please call the roll.
Dwayne Jones,
Yes.
Glenn Zaring,
Yes.
Catherine Levy,
Yes.
Basic condition 3 has been found to be met. Basic condition 4 states the requested variance is not of a recurrent nature to require a change in the zoning ordinance. The justification reads, we are not aware of any other appeal requests for directional signs since the 2017 exemption was removed. Section 2103E.
And do we have any questions?
no.
No.
Please take the vote, Nancy.
Dwayne Jones,
Yes.
Glenn Zaring,
Yes.
Catherine Levy,
Yes.
Basic condition 4 has been found met. Basic condition 5 states the requested variance is for property under the control of the applicant, with the justification reading, Robert and Laura Horvat own the property.
Do we have questions? No? Please call the roll.
Dwayne Jones,
Yes.
Glenn Zaring,
Yes.
Catherine Levy,
Yes.
Basic condition 5 has been found met. Basic condition 6 states the requested variance was not self-created by the applicant or property owner. The justification reads, the need for a variance was created by the removal of the traffic control exemption in 2017.
Do we have questions? Please take the roll.
Dwayne Jones,
Yes.
Glenn Zaring,
Yes.
Catherine Levy,
Yes.
Basic condition 6 has been found met. Basic condition 7 states, there is not an alternative that would allow the improvement to the property without this requested variance. The justification states, directional signs at driveway entrances are the sign industry norm for identifying driveways in a manner safe for motorists making turning decisions.
Do we have any questions? Please take the roll.
Dwayne Jones,
Yes.
Glenn Zaring,
Yes.
Catherine Levy,
Yes,
Basic condition 7 has been found met. Basic condition 8 in the last basic condition states, the requested variance is the minimum amount necessary to still permit the reasonable use of the land. The justification states, although there are 2 driveways, the request is for 3 signs because the curve in the road makes visibility of the south driveway difficult, though 3 signs are now just the 1 for now.
Do we have any questions on that one?
Make a note of that.
Please call the roll.
Dwayne Jones,
Yes.
Glenn Zaring,
Yes.
Catherine Levy,
yes,
Basic condition 8 has been found met. Special conditions, when all the foregoing basic conditions can be satisfied, a variance may be granted when any one of the following special conditions can be clearly demonstrated. There are 3 that are listed here, so I guess we can pick the first one and go with that. The question states, are there practical difficulties with the property that prevents full compliance with the requirements of the ordinance? Practical difficulties are evaluated in terms of the use of the parcel. Neither the fact that appellant could incur additional costs to achieve full compliance or receive additional income with less than full compliance are to be considered. The justification states driveways need safe identification because of speed of traffic and the curve that it's on.
Questions? Please take the roll.
Dwayne Jones,
Yes.
Glenn Zaring,
Yes.
Catherine Levy,
yes,
Special condition 1 has been met, therefore the variance for 220 Arthur regarding the one directional sign has been granted. Being that there can be stipulations added upon this, I know the applicant was talking about 2 other signs in the future. So in that regard, would you like to condition this a variance for the 2 other signs in the future when they come into fruition, or do you recommend that another case be heard?
My feeling is we should hear, I think it's, as it sits right now, the sign that's been approved is fine without condition. I think we just need to look at it again when the other, that's my personal opinion, when the other signs are needed, when they decide to do them, then we should look at it again and see what they look, or see how it looks and examine the situation at that point.
Catherine?
yes.
I concur with what Dwayne just said.
Okay, so what I understand is the variance has been accepted or approved for a one-directional sign as noted on the existing site plan with the application, and if any other signs are to be applied for, they would have to come before the Zoning Board of Appeals again, is that right?
Correct.
Okay. That concludes this case, and I will be in touch with the applicant and the agent of the applicant to assess and address the sign permit accordingly.
Super. Thank you. Next, we have a pending case of 160 Memorial, which per the notice from planning administrator is asking us how to define the calculation of the amount of square footage for the example parcel. And just a personal note, thank you, Kyle, for putting things this way. I understand better now what we actually are looking at.
Yep, so what we heard last meeting was the same exact case, though the motion was too specific as noted in the memo, which is not uncommon, though I should have caught it in the meeting, but it needed to be more general, and the applicant has provided an addendum to the application for ease in the sense of wording what exactly was being sought. I have that addendum here. I'll pull it up so we all can read it. It's in your packets. I'm sure we've all had enough time to read over now. Does anyone have any questions about that? And if they do, please direct them towards the agent of the organization who is here representing 160 Memorial Street. So
So is this in regard to the recommended changes about the public right-of-way and about the storefronts for that definition, which was in the Amor letter of January, I forget the exact date here. 8th, right.
So I believe, though I won't speak on behalf of Mr. Amor, though, I believe it was to, for the existing, how to read the existing language and interpret it for this existing ordinance, and it has no recommendation for future ordinances. Is that right? So what, sorry, so in the memo, it states, for each, for principal building, instead of principal building, we just, say storefront, and, to less complicate the wording. Do you want to speak on behalf of this memo at all more than that, or?
Yeah, if I could, I think I explained last week and showed by precedent how we've always calculated. You look at the building, multiply it times 1.5, except on the river side of the downtown district, because that's waterfront, then you use a multiplier of 0.75. And Kyle got hung up on the wording in that ordinance, A, B, and C, where it says principal building. And that's what I'm suggesting to strike, to clarify the way it had been interpreted in the past was always the storefront.
Yeah.
Principal building width, there's no definition in the ordinance for it. It's not like I'm trying to skirt anything. This is the way we've calculated it forever. And so I think we were asking for not a variance, we're asking for guidance in the interpretation. We disagreed on how it was interpreted, and I think to clarify the interpretation, and maybe it needs to be changed, but so I proposed striking the word principal building width with storefront width, and that's the way it has been calculated in the past. The other clarification is up above where the wording says maximum cumulative sign area. That was always maximum cumulative on that wall. It wasn't for the whole site.
Right.
So that's the other clarification on it, just until we can, Kyle and Mike were asking for some guidance and direction until the new ordinance gets written. I think this is the best way I could come up with to show how it had been interpreted in the past. Those 6 examples were just some from last month that showed that is, not my imagination, that is the way it was interpreted. And then for a future one we know is coming up, and I had talked to Kyle, the Manistee Inn is looking at putting letters on the back side of their building, on the riverside, and so they fall under 4C. And if we interpret it the way Kyle thought, then because they have river frontage, they get less square footage for the whole building. Right. If you look at it the way Kyle interpreted it, which doesn't make any sense at all. I think the logic just points out that the riverside gets less because it was pedestrian traffic. Every other wall on a street front gets 1.5. Is that?
Yeah. In looking through it myself, I found this was helpful, and I think it was a simple fix to use the proposed wording changes that you had brought forth. I would ask Kyle his opinion of these changes, if he thought they were acceptable or not.
For this specific case and this specific ordinance, I think it's acceptable to consider that this is the interpretation based on the Zoning Board of Appeals voting, if that's how they interpret it as well. I believe that when we come forth with a future sign ordinance, more definitive, distinct language could be easier in the future, as we've already talked about. But regarding principal building and eliminating that from whichever motion is stated today will be helpful moving forward. So the cumulative sign area is a difficult one to consider, but, you know, each storefront elevation makes it easier because it's a difficult wording, in my opinion, to interpret. So by having each storefront elevation, I think that's a very helpful thing that Mr. Amor has brought to the attention, and that future sign ordinances can be and even more specific with those wordings. So
That definitely clears it up.
Doesn't it?
My question is, when is this new ordinance language going to be effective instead of having something that's gonna be in our face?
okay, so I can show you a draft of it if you'd like to right now, or I could show you when I have a staff report. I can show it to you today. But it's a 50-page document that's includes, you know, 5 to 10 pages of just definitions. There's a lot more graphics involved. I mean, I'll show it to you in the staff
Oh,
report.
I think the question is when.
Right.
Oh, when? So it's a draft is what I meant to get to the point of. It's a draft. It's been shown at city council, or at the planning commission to just get an opinion about it. There needs to be a work session for different professionals in the industry in the area, as well as city council and planning commission. It's been very busy at the office, and to put this ahead of other things that have staunch deadlines and you know, grant applications and things that are at the front of the workload, I can't say a specific date. I'd like to have it in the beginning of spring, April.
Okay, but we're not looking like a year out? or-
No, it'll be before the midpoint of the year. I would assume that it would be adopted before the midpoint of the year. There are very many steps and stipulations to get to that point, and that is a staunch generalization as to when it will be. But we are doing our best to acknowledge the different things around the city, like the sign ordinance, and I can't tell you a specific date right now, Catherine, I'm sorry, but sooner the better, obviously.
Again, my concern is there's a lot of activity in town, things
Yep.
that are gonna be, you know, new storefronts and new buildings and so on. And I just wanna be sure that we're not going to be swallowing this on a continuing basis for any, you know, extended period of time.
I concur.
Yeah.
So do you need a motion to approve these proposed changes as recommended or proposed by Mr. Amor until such time as the new sign-in ordinance is put into place?
Yep, so I think what would be helpful for a motion moving forward with the, first of all, we need to be specific with the motion to state that section 2102A4A through A4D before stating the motion needs to be said in the motion, so it's more specific. Does that make sense? To state that the principal building should be determined as each storefront elevation instead of the principal building width. Does that make sense? So instead of getting hung up on the principal building, having it so that that would be substituted for storefront elevation, basically. So if we look at the case at 160 Memorial, we can walk through it to see if what we're talking about is what you would like to see. So for each storefront elevation would mean that, let me pull up the diagram really quick, okay?
It also says, and I didn't point out, but the wording, the existing wording does say storefronts facing a public right of way. So that shape of the stable and all those back sides wouldn't apply, it would need to face a right of way.
Well, if, a question on my part here, if we do go ahead and adopt this wording that you've proposed, Tom, and we look at the 160 Memorial situation, logic to me indicates we have two storefronts.
Right.
One facing Memorial, one facing 31. So they would be treated as separate entities for the determination of sign height and dimensions, which to me seems very logical. Now, is that your interpretation, Kyle?
So if we're looking at this graphic, can you rephrase the question, I guess? So there's 31 and Memorial Drive. The curve is Memorial, the street above it obviously is 31. So if we were to calculate this based upon what was presented in the sense of each storefront, how would you determine, 1.5 times this exact? So each side would get a different size sign allowed. Is that what you're saying?
Well, looking at this particular building, it's also a shared business. You have Echo moved into the portion to the west of where the Save-A-Lot is located.
Mm-hmm.
So they're gonna have their own signage issues.
Our application where that 270 feet is.
Yep.
That elevation, our application just has 130.
35, I think, if I remember.
Do you mind coming up
Yeah.
That's why I'm asking them.
So the south storefront, and on this footprint, Kyle put this together, I think. The 270 is the whole building, but over where Council on Aging is, measuring from that corner at the southeast corner
Yeah.
towards the west, our storefront is only 130.5 feet. So the multiplier would be 130 times 1.5 is the allowable square footage for that storefront.
Okay, so just to clarify, if there is a building with multiple stores, the storefront in question of the sign would be where the actual store begins and ends on a plane, if you will, on one side of the building. Is that what I'm understanding?
Yeah. Well, that would be my understanding, just looking at logically, because, the Council on Aging is a separate entity just housed in a contiguous building.
So they have a different storefront.
They have a different storefront.
So 270 take away 130 would be their storefront. I believe if they go all the way to the west, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But we're not using their storefront in our calculations, we're just using the Save-A-Lot.
Which, again, in my mind, is a logical way to go.
That makes sense.
Catherine?
Okay, so let me pull up this sign regulation table so we're all on the same page, because that language of principal building still pertains in the regulation table. I just want to be clear we're all on the same page, okay?
Okay.
Well, that's pretty slick.
So right in this area, talks about principal, I'm trying to point to it right there. Do you see that?
Yep.
So with principal building width, that's going to be for each storefront of a building facing a right of way or whatever's in the ordinance is what. Instead of principal building width, it'll be storefront though. That's what I'm understanding. And in the new ordinance, this will be cleaned up. This is difficult. I mean, I'm sure everyone who looks at it without knowing about it, it's hard to read, right? So, that being said, getting back to the point of calculating these, so it'll be taking the existing storefront of a building, multiplying it by 1.5 if it's not on a water body, and if it is, that existing plane of the storefront and multiplying it by 0.75, the multiplier of the waterfront. Is that what? Okay. That makes more sense. I do appreciate the memo that you did present.
And our intention wasn't to rewrite the ordinance. I don't think you can say this is the new ordinance, this is just guideline for interpretation.
Yeah, I understand that. So with the motion ahead of you, it'd be helpful to put into fruition not only the 2102, I think it was A, as well as the sign regulation table to interpret the principal building width as storefront moving forward. Does that make sense to everyone? Dwayne, do you have any questions about that?
I don't have any questions.
All right.
I'm quite sure the wording of our.
Wording,
Yep, so in the memo that was in the packet, it goes over the exact section 2102A4A through 2102A4C to interpret the word principal building width as storefront for the entirety of the existing ordinance, sign ordinance, until a new sign ordinance takes its place, as well as the sign regulation table, something like that.
So moved.
Is there a second?
I second, yes.
No, I appreciate the jokes, all aside, it will need to come from a ZBA member, just stating what section of the ordinance through what section, and if you wanted to write this down, I can rewrite it, I can even re-say it.
I was following along
Okay,
as you
yeah,
recited that, so.
so 2102A4A through A4, I think it's,
D,
yep,
I don't get D.
yeah, it's A4A through A4D.
Yeah, but I don't understand D. What do you mean, maybe transfer to a site? I mean,
There is no change in D.
okay, so then why is it?
all right, so 2102A4A through 2102A4C, as well as the sign regulation table to interpret the,
Existing sign regulation table as
The-
it is in the ordinance now, right?
as principal building width is to be interpreted as,
Storefront.
okay. All right, so that being said, that is the application and the interpretation ahead of us. It's on you and at your convenience to ask any more questions or,
Do we have any more questions about
No,
that?
I don't think so. I think we're,
Okay. Since this isn't a normal appeal, just an interpretation, do we just need then to take a vote? Well, we've already voted in support of those changes, so we can recommend that those be adopted?
so I guess what would be now is to make the motion of the specificity of just, I guess it's a generalization, though, a specific motion in the sense of just the ordinance language and not a specific parcel. I'm not trying to convolute this, but I'm just trying to say there needs to be a new motion that addresses the ordinance and not a specific parcel
Right.
to interpret the language of principal building width to the new interpretation. And then after that motion happens, there'll be a second, and then there'll be a vote, if that comes to,
Okay.
that were to happen.
Yeah.
Do you want to make that motion, Ken?
sure, I'll make that.
All right.
Hereby make that motion.
I second it.
Gotta state it. That's why I passed it on.
I hereby make the motion that we accept the proposed changes read to the section 2102A4A through section 2102A4C, which applies only to the language and not to the building, any building.
Correct.
And to include the,
Oh, and to include the
What?
chart.
And to include what?
the chart within the existing ordinance.
The chart within the existing ordinance.
all right, so just say it one more time and we'll be good. No, I'm serious, we're right here, we're really close, it just needs to be the legality behind it. It needs to just say
Yeah.
what you just said, including the sign regulation table, and then that will be your motion. What you just said was really good, except add the sign regulation table, and that's it.
Okay.
Try again, round 2.
I hereby move that we accept the proposed changes in red to section 2102A4A through section 2102A4C for the changes in the language from principal building to storefront elevation and include the, whatever, the sign regulation table chart there too. Goodbye.
Second.
Call the roll, please, Nancy.
Dwayne Jones,
Yes.
Glenn Zaring,
Yes.
Catherine Levy,
Yes.
Thank you much.
Ugh.
Hot water with my vendor.
All right, so from now on, any sign permits that come to fruition on a questionable street as such, instead of the principal building width being determined, it would be storefront elevation.
Correct.
Tom, thanks so much for helping
Thank
us
you.
clear that up.
All right, so are there any other questions about this case or any other cases then?
I have none. Kathy?
No,
I'm good.
We're good.
so you want to close it?
Yeah, is there any other old business we have taken care of?
None today.
Okay, any public comments? Public? Step forward.
The public
All right.
has appeared.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. This meeting is adjourned.